Hey guys, if you can't tell by the giant smile on my face, I am so excited about today's lesson. So a little backstory about why I'm so excited about today's lesson. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with miniseries and docudramas. I remember watching a movie called Glory, and it was about the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, and I became obsessed with that, so I did all the research I could on that movie. It's a great movie, so watch it. And then there was a mini-series on Napoleon and Josephine Bonaparte. That was fascinating. So I became obsessed with that, and I researched everything I could. Of course, back then, we didn't have the internet. I am that old. So I would read, like, encyclopedias and books. And so anyway, I became obsessed with certain parts of history. Then when I started working at Sequoyah, I didn't start out as a teacher. I was a paraprofessional, which is kind of like a teacher's assistant. And the teacher, Mrs. McAwee, hey, Mrs. McAwee, she taught math. And that's what really sparked my love and interest in math and why I later became a teacher. Fast forward to me going to college in my 30s. Don't try that at home because it's not easy. I mean, do try it if you really want to. But anyway, I took one class on the history of mathematics. Aren't you excited just by that word or phrase? Woohoo! And it changed my world, literally. I didn't see daily life the same because it made me realize that we are literally standing on the shoulders of giants. Everything that we have at our disposal that we take for granted was all due to these pioneers. And there are hundreds of mathematicians that changed the world. And I literally could go all day about these mathematicians. But I've chosen about 5 or 6 of my favorite mathematicians, and I hope at the end of this lesson that you are fired up about math history. So here we go. Mathematicians who changed history. Okay, the first thing I have for you is I want you to think about this. Was math invented or discovered? And this is actually a big debate among mathematicians and scientists. You have one group that believe it was actually discovered. And what does that mean, discovered? It means that these group of mathematicians believe in a higher power, and that math is already there or was already there, and that they just discovered it. Invented would mean that the math wasn't already there waiting to be discovered, that it was actually created out of quote-unquote thin air. And I'm sure if our teacher before, because I'm having a blank, Miss Smith, thank you. Didn't have breakfast this morning. Eat breakfast, guys. She would probably tell me that was a pun or not an onomatopoeia, but clearly I need to go back to 6th grade language arts. Anyway, so think about that as we go through these different mathematicians, and then ask yourself at the end of this lesson, which side are you on? Okay, so Ramanujan is like in my top 3 favorite mathematicians of all time. He is a Hindi mathematician, and for those of you that don't know what Hindi is, Hindi or Hindu is a religion, but he is from the country of India. So when someone says that they're Indian, they're not talking about Native American, because there is a difference. So he started out as really a child prodigy. He was too smart for his own britches. Another Mrs. Smith thing that we just went over. It says he wrote most of his formulas on the temple floors. So he was very, very poor. and didn't have paper. And so what he would do is he would go to his temple where he would worship his God, and these formulas would just come to him. He didn't have any formal training. He didn't go to a university. He didn't have some big degree. They literally, as he would describe it, they just come to him on his tongue. And I'll explain later where he then tells us in a movie, but really he did tell us where he does get these formulas from. So he would write the formulas on the floor, and he would write it in like a chalk dust. So he spent 5 years at Trinity College and became the first person of color to become a fellow. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, he eventually got a job as a clerk for a British company, because at the time of Ramanujan's life, Britain pretty much had rule over India. And one of his mentors at this paper packing plant that he worked at, so to speak, was really impressed with Ramanujan's math. He could do these crazy complex formulas calculating money all in his head and within seconds. And so this mentor of his helped him write letters to different universities over in Europe. And he got a response from G.H. Hardy, who was a fellow. Fellow is a fancy word for a professor at Trinity College. And fun fact, Trinity College is actually where Isaac Newton went to college. So he spent 5 years there, and really why he went there wasn't necessarily to receive a degree. He went there to get formal training on how to prove his formulas. In other words, he would have these complex formulas that nobody could understand, and they wanted to know, well, how did you get to this point? How do you know that this formula is actually going to work? And so what the professors there helped him do was prove his formulas. So when your teacher says, show your work, that's what Ramanujan had to do. He had to prove that these calculations would be successful. When he passed away at the age of 32. He caught tuberculosis while he was in England, almost died, recovered from it. And then on the journey back to India, he caught it again and was there a year with his family, his wife and his mom, and then eventually passed away from tuberculosis. So he was alive during the First World War, so the early 1900s. In 1976, a group of historians, scientists, I'm not really sure which one it was, but they found what are called his lost notebooks, meaning nobody had ever seen this work before. And it was the formulas in that lost notebook that helped scientists today understand black holes. So here we have a young man who was obsessed with mathematics, didn't even, imagine probably that his work would be used one day to help us understand the universe and outer space. And so that's one example of how math relates to another field of science, astronomy. Okay, so one of Ramanujan's big accomplishments while he was at Trinity College, and this is really the formula that gave him the notoriety he was looking for and the validation that he really, his math had a purpose. And it's Ramanujan's partition formula. And partitions are really easy to understand. So basically, it says, how many different ways can you add to get the number 4? And there's 5 different ways. So something like that simple. Well, how many different ways can you add to get to the number 100? Well, before Ramanujan's formula, there would be mathematicians that would painstakingly by hand count the different ways they can add up to get the number 100. Well, Ramanujan, one evening at Trinity College, he was praying to his Namagi, which in the Hindu religion, that is each family kind of has their own idol that they worship, their own god. And he later told J.H. Hardy that that is how these formulas came to him, that God was putting them on his tongue. And so Ramanujan, mathematics and religion for him were one and the same, because he said, unless math expresses a thought of God, it means nothing to me. So I thought that was interesting. So basically, Ramanujan came up with this formula and said, you give me any number, and I can plug this number into the formula and quickly calculate how many different ways it can be added up. And he did. Okay, so this is, I don't know anything about black holes, except it pulls like gravity and stuff inward. But this is the first ever image caught of a black hole. And I bet if Ramanujan were alive today, he'd be pretty stoked at that picture. Okay, Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace is a British mathematician. When I was making the slideshow, first I put English mathematician, then I thought, no, there's going to be too many kids out there that think English and American. But so anyway, British. She lived during the 1800s, and her work is considered to be the first written computer algorithm. Algorithm is a fancy word for really long formula, in that it contains written instructions for a machine to follow. So she wrote an algorithm that basically you could apply to, in her mind, some kind of machine that you could give it directions and have it do something. So some mathematicians might say she wasn't the first computer programmer. I would disagree with them. She worked under another computer programmer who's really considered to be the father of computer programming, and his name was Charles Babbage. You are not going to find a whole lot of famous female mathematicians compared to the number of men, and here's why. In the time of Ada Lovelace, being smart, having your own opinion, really being able to express yourself was not something that was looked highly upon. She came from a family where she was actually what you would call like a love child, in that her father was Lord Byron, and he was a famous poet. And so she probably had a little bit of an easier time getting her foot into that world because her father was famous and revered at the time. But a lot of the female mathematicians that you'll find come from very poor upbringings. And so they really had to struggle to get their foot in the door. Another female mathematician that I think is amazing that I didn't include in the slideshow is Marie Curie. And she basically discovered radium, which is radiation, and that's why we can do like x-rays and MRIs, you know, because like I say to my kids in class, math builds upon itself. So when I say that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, I'm meaning that there's someone else that came before us who really did all the hard work and knew that what they were doing was important and was hoping someday someone would take their work that they did and build upon it and build upon it. And we have. Okay, Godfried Leibniz. He is a contemporary, meaning a counterpart of Isaac Newton. You hear a lot about Isaac Newton and how he discovered or invented, which one is it? Gravity, laws of motion, calculus during the Great Plague back in like the 1700s. Isaac Newton was pretty much quarantined like we are right now. And so it was during this quarantine of like 18 months that he discovered, invented, what have you, calculus. So that's in England. Well, around the same time, Godfried Leibniz also discovered calculus, but you won't hear about him. And his life was actually pretty sad. There was a big dispute among the fellow mathematicians with Isaac Newton and Godfried Leibniz. And pretty much Isaac Newton accused this man of stealing his work. So because Isaac Newton was so revered, he pretty much ruined Godfried Leibniz's life. He lived a very lonely life, and when he finally did pass away, historians tell us that nobody went to his funeral. That's pretty sad. He went on to become one of the most productive inventors of mechanical calculators. So when you're able to use a calculator in class, you need to thank this guy right here. Inventing both the pinwheel calculator and the Leibniz wheel. The Leibniz wheel was used in the arithmeter, which was the first real mass-produced mechanical calculator. Now, something that I don't have on the slideshow that I want to talk about is binary numbers. And for those computer geeks out there, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Binary numbers are 0 and 1. And he created the binary number system because he wanted to simplify human error or completely get rid of it. And so he believed he could do that by just using 0 and 1, which is how these calculators worked, using zeros and ones. Well, what does that mean for us today? Well, when computers speak to each other, they use zeros and ones. They use the binary number system. So because of this dude, I love the word dude. I do say that a lot. Because of this dude, we are able to use computers and email and FaceTime our loved ones, using your cell phones, your smartphones. So thank Mr. Godfried for that one. Okay, Archimedes. Love me some Archimedes. He's my streaker. He is most known for running through the streets naked, shouting Eureka, which translated means I've got it, I've got it. And the story behind that is the king wanted to find out whether his crown was real or not. Was he cheated when he asked the royal jeweler, to make him this crown? So supposedly Archimedes was sitting in the bathtub and somehow the crown became involved and it was floating or not floating in the water. And that's when he got freaked out and he ran out of the bathtub, naked through the streets, yelling, Eureka, he'd figured it out. Some historians will say, though, that wasn't the real story because the word crown comes from the Greek word corona, which actually means ship. Now, this part is true. He designed and helped build a massive ship called the Syracusia, which was to be a gift for, I think it was the Pharaoh Ptolemy. It made one journey. There's no records in the history books of whatever happened to it, and I'll give you my theory on that here in a little bit. But it made a voyage to the city of Alexandria. So he was obsessed with mathematics, and he wrote in the dirt. When he was murdered, it is said to be that he said, "I beg of you, please do not disturb this." And he was actually killed during the Roman invasion. He invented the Archimedes screw, which is still used today, and he discovered the law of buoyancy. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, you can thank this guy. This is a picture on the left of an ancient Archimedes screw, and this is a picture of an Archimedes screw system actually in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a very low-lying country, and so they flood sometimes, or often, I guess. And the Archimedes screw is when you turn it, it pumps water from the bottom to the top. So this made irrigation farming much easier for farmers in ancient times because they didn't have to plant their crops close to the river. And this way their crops also didn't get flooded. Okay, Pythagoras. Pythagoras is another Greek mathematician. He's considered to be the father of musical spheres. So all you band buffs or musical buffs out there, he discovered that when you had clay pots that were spherical and then they were proportioned to one another, meaning their fractions were not the same, but they were proportioned to one another, we could make them equal. The sound coming off of them was a beautiful harmony. He believed the universe could be explained by using whole numbers. He was obsessed with whole numbers. He formed a school/religion where students couldn't eat beans because he believed that when you farted, part of your soul left your body. So while he was brilliant, he was a little off his rocker. He gave us the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, this is my last mathematician. Hypatia was a Greek/Egyptian mathematician. And I say Greek because that's where her ancestry is from, but she lived in Egypt, in the city of Alexandria. So, quick history about the city of Alexandria. The city of Alexandria was named after Alexander the Great. And so he pretty much established this city, and he wanted Alexandria to be a mecca of knowledge and culture. So in the ancient times, it was a place of knowledge and beauty and art and great knowledge. And the Library of Alexandria housed some of the greatest works known to man. And I believe, let me go back. I believe that some of the lost information from these ancient mathematicians was housed in that library, and that's why we've lost some information today. So she lived during the 4th and 5th centuries in Alexandria, Egypt. She taught philosophy and astronomy, the motion of planets, the number theory and conic sections at the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria. And that's actually a school that her father started. And it wasn't that big of a deal for a woman to become the head of a school because Alexandria was such a progressive city. She was taught by her father and eventually replaced him as the leading mathematician in Alexandria. So Alexandria, in this time of Hypatia's life, were ending the modern era of ancient times. And during this time, there was a group of zealot Christians. And when I say Christians, I'm not talking about like the people you go to church with nowadays that, you know, are loving and kind. These group of people that called themselves Christians hated anything that was different from them. And all of what Hypatia stood for was different from them because she was talking about science and being progressive. And when Alexandria started to be taken over by these Christians, She was murdered, and she died a very grisly death. History will tell us that they took shells and scooped her skin out, and they ripped her body apart. So that's a pretty horrifying way to die. But math is everywhere. It's in everything that we do. From this building is full of geometry. Without geometry, we can't build stuff. The house that you live in, the car that your parents drive, someday the cars that you'll drive, is fueled by, yes, I know, gas or petroleum, but it's fueled by mathematics. And it's an exciting world. So I hope that you found something new that you loved about these mathematicians. The movie, The Man Who Knew Infinity, is about the first mathematician, Ramanujan. And I highly, highly recommend that you watch it. It will change your life. I'm telling you it will. So I will see you guys next school year. Be safe, have fun, and learn something new.